talking about the election. It was wild. So what's this? What we're breaking this? We're doing this in different pieces, so we can put it on the YouTube channel, and other things. So what's the spin on? What's the objective of this segment, Mr. Webster?
Okay, so this segment we are talking about the candidate that the Democrats ran. Her name is Hillary Rodham Clinton. By all measures, and from anyone who's an insider within Washington, D.C., she was described as the most experienced and qualified candidate on the planet to be president, and yet we are sitting here with her not as the president. So now we have to ask ourselves, in hindsight, was Hillary Clinton the correct selection? We can look at Joe Biden, we can look at Bernie Sanders, we can look at a different, even a different vice president running mate could have changed the outcome here. These are all things on the table, but starting with Hillary Clinton, was she the right candidate, Richard?
Clearly no.
Clearly no, because she didn't win, right?
Yeah. I mean, but I want to point this out, people, because you can say Richard was right here. At the beginning of this whole thing, I was with her. I voted for her. I went to the convention. We covered the convention. But Rich, I was talking about these things. What we see sort of teasing itself out is stuff I said.
Oh, yeah. It was obvious to anyone who's paying attention. She, throughout the entire process, was someone that really just never got there.
No, she never got there. And let's take this for just a minute if we can. Take emails, take Comey, take FBI, take Benghazi, take all of that out, and just look at what we saw from this candidate. Going in, they spent way too much time trying to define, talking about Donald Trump. Now, I get the strategy. The strategy is you define your opponent early. But what the Clinton campaign already had was the fact that 17 Republican candidates defined Donald Trump. Yeah. So we should have, if we were to do this over again, we should have defined him all the way until the convention. Once we got to the convention, we move away from defining Donald Trump to talking about what our issues are. So then you put this map out a little bit more, right? So you have the convention happens. Then because clearly when all these tapes dropped, when, the Alyssa Machado, which I think was fine, the grab him by the P word, those could have still dropped. And if Hillary Clinton had just stayed on message about what I'm going to do, one thing that you could take away from this, and I said this morning when I woke up, I went to bed at 4 a.m. We're taping the show on Thursday. And I went to bed at 4 a.m. and I woke up and I said this. And I'm going to ask you the question. Let me see if I get this. What's Hillary Clinton's position on minimum wage?
Raise it.
Fair. But is there specifics?
Listen, the only reason I know that is because I'm familiar with the Democratic Party platform on most things. But to a person, listen, here's an easier way to do it. What's Donald Trump's position on immigration?
Building a wall, and Mexico's going to pay for it.
We could answer these questions for Donald Trump very easily with literal sound bites. There is nothing like that for Hillary Clinton on any issue.
No, because what she did is she wonkified all the issues into these big...
Yeah, it's here. Well, I've got this great 300,000-page paper.
And that's fine.
That you
can have your white papers on your website because people like to read them. I'm not one of those people.
People
like to read them. But I think what we should have heard from her is laying out, I get it, Donald Trump's a bully. I get he's temperamentally unfit. But clearly those definitions, what we learned, did not stick. Yeah. So you should have focused on what you're going to do for the American people. And I think the problem that this campaign had is and I'm going to go on a whole diatribe about this. I don't know if I should say my diatribe for now or go to my diatribe for later.
Well, we have an entire show. Save it for later.
Okay. So that's Hillary Clinton. Who we pick? Oh, then you said vice president. That's the next thing.
Oh, well, one other thing about Hillary Clinton. I think you're totally right, all those points. The bottom line is her messaging was literally non-existent.
It was just Donald Trump is mentally unfit.
And that doesn't work. Richard and I said this the entire lead up, the election, even before the candidates were set.
Pull the tapes.
People don't go out and vote against somebody.
They vote for someone.
They support a candidate. And listen, Hillary Clinton was not that candidate, unfortunately. Now, I do want to have one little asterisk, and then we'll move on to some of the other options that were available. Richard kind of blew off Comey in the emails and Benghazi, and I agree with him completely. Here's
Blow
a
them
situation
off.
where if you have a swarmy, people person, lovable Democratic candidate who's a man, those are not issues.
I
sorry.
agree.
100%, you throw them all out, they don't matter. The only reason that
Bill Clinton was sleeping with Jennifer Flowers while he was running for president, and he was still the president.
Exactly. So obviously there is structural, inherent sexism. But let's move on. Okay, so we can talk about some of the other candidates and how they would have worked. Now, Bernie Sanders is an interesting choice. He obviously is not part of the Democratic Party machine, but he did have numbers showing him head-to-head that he would beat Donald Trump.
Here's what Bernie Sanders, in my opinion, did. Bernie Sanders created, and I hate to say the polls because all the polls are wrong, but there was Bernie Sanders. Let me put it like this: there was, if you were to look this from a statistical perspective, there was some Bernie Sanders noise early on in the campaign, and that noise grew bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Right, and as Bernie Sanders ran out of room to run, right? As his campaign started to pick up momentum, ran out of room to run. I think the party establishment and turnout machine of the Democratic Party, which we now know from WikiLeaks, was sort of in the tank.
Oh yeah, they were not interested in Bernie
for Hillary. But I think what the Democrats did not do is answer the Bernie noise. They said, "Oh, we're going to take parts of your platform," but they didn't adequately feed the hunger of that Bernie noise to turn that Bernie noise off. So those voters either did one or two things. One, they either exited the system, right? Or two, they switched and voted for Donald Trump.
Yeah, I mean, listen, here's a perfect example. And I mean, this gets into a larger
If they didn't
conversation.
vote for Hillary, by the way.
This gets into a larger conversation that we'll have about the actual polling numbers and how crazy that was. But I know people that wrote in Bernie Sanders. They showed up to vote and they wrote in Bernie Sanders, thinking, "Oh, Hillary's up 3 to 4 points. There's no way she's going to win. I'm going to make my statement, and I'm still going to have it the way I wanted." They are now kicking themselves.
I don't think that vote was enough. I think
of course it's not enough, but it's a symptom of a problem, right?
I saw a tweet yesterday in Florida. I guess between Jill Stein and the other guy.
What, Gary Johnson?
Gary Johnson, the 250,000 votes went between the two of them. 2 or 3 points. So it's you could blame Hillary's loss on them.
No.
Barack Obama sailed through Florida.
Yeah.
I mean, Al Gore won Florida, the popular vote in Florida, even though what's-his-face was running. What's his name? You know who I'm talking about, the Green Party guy.
Nader?
Ralph Nader.
Yeah.
Him. So, and I say that. And now the next thing is, who should... So we talked about Bernie. The other person and I will say this now, we're not too far from the Naval Observatory where the vice president lives. I'm pretty sure Joe Biden's throwing up.
Here's the thing with Joe Biden, and he would have won. I think we can say that with high level of certainty. He would have won. But Joe Biden was in an unfortunate situation where when it was time to play ball, and one of his closest advisors, who I'm pretty sure is his sister, actually said that as early as 2012, they were preparing.
Yeah.
They were preparing for him to run. And then his son gets brain cancer. And here's the thing. Listen. Presidential campaign is one of the hardest things that a human being can do.
I hear that, but even up until the day, and some sources close to the Biden team, who I know, they were saying, they had a website ready.
Yeah, they're ready to go.
The International Association of Firefighters were going to come out. There was all these moves that were moving, and basically the candidate would wake up every morning and go back and forth. I think part of it is somebody on his team said to him, probably a pollster, "Oh, you just don't have enough room to run. We don't have the structural ability to do it."
I think it was totally related to his son.
I don't think it was all related to his son. Because I actually
interview with him 3 days ago that said it was.
I get that, but I actually think his son would have made him a bet. I think him losing his son, you can't force anybody to run for president, but I think him losing his son would have made him a better candidate.
Yeah. But I don't think he was fit to do it.
Because America's hurting, and he understands hurt and pain, which is why the reason why Joe Biden is so effective at speaking to working class. The reason why Joe Biden has been so effective as a senator and so effective as a vice president is because he really has this pulse. He has his literally, and if you're watching this video, like he has his hand, his two fingers on the pulse of America. Donald Trump doesn't. I don't believe that Donald Trump has his fingers on the pulse of America.